So, the story begins with Sophie and Nolan. Nolan is a food writer in a magazine, and this time, he has been given a new topic: how did the people of the past collect food? He had to write an article on hunting and gathering in which he used to explain this, and he could have explained that how difficult this work would have been for the people of that time. He could have written about all this only when he had his own experience, but then what happened? He decides that he will do hunting himself, but he didn't know anything about hunting before in this regard. He has come to Sophie's village with Sophie. Sophie's grandfather was a hunter, and Sophie was also very good at hunting, but 10 years ago, Sophie stopped hunting. Whose reason? She tells that once when she went to hunt, she saw in the eyes of the deer seeing her innocence. Sophie did not have the courage to kill her after that day. She never hunted, and then never ate non-veg, and today after many years, she came here again for Nolan because Nolan was her fiancé to hunt. Her heart still doesn't agree, but to help Nolan, she calls her childhood friend Kyle. Kyle first teaches Nolan how to shoot an arrow. Nolan was learning, but to shoot an arrow and hunt, a lot of practice is required, and he had to hunt the next morning. That's why Kyle teaches him how to shoot a rifle, with which Nolan quickly began to make good marks during practice. Kyle and Nolan had a lot of talks, but Kyle's topic was only one: that Sophie is his childhood friend. She is very important to him. She takes good care of him, etc., etc. And Nolan was very angry with this because Sophie was his fiancée, and when someone else was talking about her, then he couldn't tolerate it at all. Sophie, who was meeting Kyle after a long time, she also leaves Nolan and starts giving importance to Kyle, and Nolan gets very angry with this and gets angry and goes to the room. Sophie had noticed this behavior when she goes behind him. Nolan scolds her. Why has Kyle come alone? He could have called his girlfriend because of him. Our trip is getting ruined. Look, Nolan, Kyle has come here because of you. If you don't go to him, then what's the point of this whole trip? Nolan also realized his mistake. That's why he goes out and apologizes to Sophie before he could say anything else. Kyle also came to him, and Nolan left from there. Here, Kyle told Sophie that he is broken up. It was clear from his behavior that he is telling Sophie everything because he likes Sophie. Kyle was understanding all this behavior because now Sophie started getting angry with Nolan as if Nolan didn't like Sophie, and because of this, Sophie also started thinking about the camel anyway. Now, in the morning, we saw that Kyle and Nolan were going to the jungle alone for hunting. Here, Sophie put a bullet in Kyle's pocket, and then they went to the jungle. Now, after going a little far, a deer came in front of them. Kyle said to Nolan that it's a good chance. Sophie pointed a gun at the deer, but she couldn't kill him because he was very merciful. But Kyle, who already knew how to hunt, he shot the deer. This time the deer fell, but didn't die. Nolan told Kyle to shoot again so that all his pain and suffering would end, but Kyle, instead of doing this, he stood far away and pointed a gun at the deer. This time the deer got injured but didn't fall, but ran away. Kyle ran after the deer, who was bleeding, but after going a little far, the bleeding stopped. Nolan was shouting at Kyle to leave the deer and shoot the deer so that all his suffering would end. On one side the deer was running, and on the other side, because of Nolan's shouting, Kyle was very frustrated anyway. Now he goes after Nolan to kill the deer. Kyle was eating the deer. Kyle was used to all this. He was still standing here. Nolan was sweating. He wanted to run away, but Kyle told him to stand straight. If you try to move, you will die. Kyle was trying to shoot, but the gun was stuck in his back pocket. Nolan couldn't stop him, and he quickly turned around and freed Kyle's gun. Kyle shoots the deer without wasting any time, but at that time the deer injured Nolan a lot. 2 more deer came. Kyle shoots one of them and runs them away. Nolan was shouting and Kyle was shouting. Kyle was shocked. He didn't understand what to do. He left Nolan here and went back. Kyle couldn't understand what he told Sophie. Sophie asked him, "Where is Nolan?" He replied, "The wolves attacked Nolan. I tried to save him, but the wolves injured him a lot." Sophie's eyes were tearing. She couldn't believe Kyle. She asked him, "Is Nolan alive or dead?" Kyle said he doesn't know. Sophie didn't know where Kyle and Nolan were. That's why Kyle goes with him until they reach the forest. They realized Nolan wasn't there. It's shown in the flashback. Nolan was walking slowly to save his life. Sophie reaches the place where they hunted the deer. Sophie thought Kyle was lying to her. Kyle said they couldn't hunt. Sophie thought Kyle killed Nolan out of jealousy. Sophie started shouting, Whereas Nolan, you killed him. You were jealous. Nolan said you had a fight with him. You killed him. Kyle said Nolan is not worthy of you. Forget him. Sophie lost her temper. In anger, she punched Kyle and left. Alone to find Nolan, she saw the footprints of the wolves. She thought it must be Nolan. She found Nolan. Nolan was badly injured. Before she could help Nolan, her own bike got stuck. The bike could have hit Nolan, but Sophie turned the direction of the bike to save Nolan. Kyle saw a wolf in the distance. The wolf was staring at him. Kyle took out his rifle to save himself, but he was unlucky. He didn't have bullets to save himself. He took out his arrow, but before he could attack the wolf attacked him. Sophie was unconscious. When she regained consciousness, a wolf was about to attack her. She took out her knife. She was attacking the wolf. She fell down this time. She was badly injured. Her hand was broken. She had only an arrow to save herself, but her right hand was broken. She couldn't fire the arrow. She was thinking another wolf came in front of her. She was brave. She straightened her hand and fired the arrow. The wolf came very close. She picked up an arrow and stabbed the wolf. She saved herself. She came to the edge of the forest where she saw Nolan helping himself. She picked him up and took him to her car. Kyle came with her. When they reached the car, Kyle was shocked because the wolves had eaten him. Sophie cried a lot, but she couldn't stay here because the wolves were in danger. She took the fuel can and took Nolan in the car. And this is where the story ends.